Every single day, the same city that inspired painters, poets, and emperors sinks a little deeper into the sea, and the world watches and does almost nothing. This is Venice, and this is why it is sinking. To understand why Venice is sinking, you first have to understand why Venice exists at all. In the 5th century, people fleeing barbarian invasions from the north escaped to the marshy lagoons of northeastern Italy. They had no solid ground. They had nothing but shallow water, mud, and desperation. So they built on it anyway. Venetian engineers drove millions of wooden piles, long timber poles, deep into the soft clay beneath the lagoon floor. These piles didn't rest on rock. They rested on mud, and yet they held. Here is the strange part. The wood didn't rot. Underwater, without oxygen, the wooden piles slowly turned to stone. Minerals in the water petrified them over centuries, making them harder than they were on the day they were cut. Under the Rialto Bridge alone, there are 12,000 of these poles. On top of this invisible underwater forest, builders placed flat stone platforms, and on top of those platforms, they built palaces, churches, markets, and homes. Venice was not a city built on water. It was a city built on wood, buried in water, supporting stone. For over 1,000 years, this worked. Then it didn't. Venice began sinking the moment it was built. This was always going to happen. The weight of millions of tons of stone pressing down on soft clay beneath the lagoon floor slowly compresses the mud. The mud squeezes out water. The ground drops. The city follows. Naturally, this process was slow, almost imperceptible over a human lifetime. But in the 20th century, humans made it catastrophically worse. As industry expanded on the mainland near Venice, companies began pumping groundwater from the aquifers beneath the lagoon. This extraction removed water from deep underground layers, causing the soil above to compact rapidly. Between 1930 and 1970, Venice sank by nearly 12 centimeters, more than it had sunk in the previous 1,000 years. When scientists understood what was happening, the pumping was stopped, but the damage could not be undone. Today, Venice sinks at approximately 1 to 2 millimeters per year from natural subsidence alone. That number sounds small. It is not. Because at the same time Venice is sinking, the sea is rising. Global sea levels are projected to rise by 8.6 millimeters every year through 2100. When you combine a sinking city with a rising sea, the math becomes alarming. By the end of this century, Venice could sit more than a meter lower relative to the Adriatic than it does today. The result is already visible. Flooding in Venice, what locals call acqua alta, or high water, is increasing in both frequency and severity. In 1900, St. Mark's Square flooded roughly 10 times per year. Today, it floods more than 100 times per year. In November 2019, Venice experienced its worst flooding in 50 years. Water rose to nearly 1.9 meters. The ancient Basilica of St. Mark's was flooded for only the 6th time in 1,200 years, and the 2nd time in 20. Italy's answer to Venice sinking was a project called MOSE, Modulo Sperimentale Elettromeccanico. The idea was conceived in the 1980s. Construction finally began in 2003. The cost was originally estimated at 1.5 billion euros. By the time the system became operational, it had cost over 6 billion euros, and the project had been consumed by one of Italy's largest corruption scandals in decades. MOSE consists of 78 hinged steel gates installed at the 3 inlets where the Adriatic Sea connects to the Venice Lagoon. When high tides are forecast, compressed air is pumped into the hollow gates, raising them from the seafloor to form a barrier across the inlets, keeping the sea out. When it works, it works. In 2022, a tide that would have flooded 82% of Venice's walkways, was successfully blocked. St. Mark's Square stayed dry, but MOSE is not a solution. It is a delay. As sea levels continue to rise, the barriers will need to be raised more frequently, from the current 30 to 40 times per year, potentially to 100 or more by mid-century. Each closure traps ships, disrupts the lagoon's ecosystem, and starves the city's economy. Scientists warn that eventually the closures may become so frequent, the lagoon essentially becomes a sealed basin, creating a new environmental catastrophe in place of the flood one. And MOSE was built to handle tides up to 3 meters. Beyond that, it cannot protect the city. There is another threat to Venice that rarely makes international headlines. Venice is not just sinking physically, it is emptying of people. In 1950, approximately 175,000 people lived in the historic center of Venice. Today, fewer than 50,000 remain. Young Venetians leave for the mainland, where housing is cheaper, jobs are more accessible, and daily life doesn't require walking through ankle-deep water to buy groceries. Every year, the city gains millions of tourists, and every year, it loses more residents. When a city loses its people, it loses its reason to survive. The buildings can be preserved, the canals can be drained, the stone can be restored. But a city without citizens is not a city. It is a museum. Venice may disappear twice, once beneath the sea, and once beneath the weight of its own tourism industry. Scientists have modeled what Venice looks like in 2100 under different scenarios. In the best case, aggressive climate action, successful MOSE upgrades, strict population retention policies, Venice survives. Damaged, altered, expensive to maintain, but alive. In the worst case, St. Mark's Square floods permanently. The ground floors of medieval palaces become underwater rooms. The city that inspired centuries of art and architecture becomes something between a ruin and a theme park, visited by tourists and boats, inhabited by no one. The Italian government has proposed several measures beyond MOSE. Engineers are testing a method of injecting fresh water deep into the clay layers beneath the lagoon, 600 meters underground, to expand the compacted soil and physically lift the city. Early models suggest this could raise Venice by up to 30 centimeters over 30 years. 30 centimeters in 30 years, against a sea that may rise 86 centimeters in the same period. Other proposals include raising the pavements of the lowest areas, installing citywide drainage systems, and rerouting large cruise ships, which create waves that erode the lagoon floor and accelerate sinking. Some of these are already happening. Most are moving too slowly. The uncomfortable truth is this: saving Venice requires the kind of long-term, coordinated, expensive commitment that governments rarely sustain. It requires decisions made today, whose benefits will only be felt in 50 years, long after the politicians who made them are gone. History does not reward that kind of patience. It is worth asking, has this ever worked before? The answer, surprisingly, is yes. The Netherlands built the Delta Works, one of the most complex flood protection systems ever constructed, after catastrophic flooding killed nearly 2,000 people in 1953. Today, the Dutch coastline is protected by a network of dams, barriers, and surge protectors that have kept the sea back for 70 years. New Orleans rebuilt its levee system after Hurricane Katrina in 2005, investing over $14 billion in flood infrastructure. The city still exists. Even Venice itself has a precedent. In the 20th century, when industrial groundwater pumping was accelerating the city's sinking at catastrophic speed, the Italian government intervened and stopped it. The sinking slowed. The city survived. Cities can be saved, but they are saved by decisions, not by hope. Venice's window is narrowing. The MOSE barriers buy time. The engineering proposals buy more. But time is the one thing water does not run out of. The sea has been rising for 20,000 years. It has never once stopped to wait for a city to catch up. Venice has survived plague, empire, war, and flood for more than 1,500 years. It survived by being impossible, by refusing to obey geography, by building a civilization on top of mud and wood and sheer human will. Whether it survives the next 100 years depends not on engineering alone, but on whether the world decides Venice is worth saving before the water makes that decision for us. The city is still there, for now.